Good evening and welcome to the City of Woodstock virtual public planning meeting. Tonight's meeting is an open public meeting as required by the Planning Act. This meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube channel, and a recording of the meeting will also be posted on the city's website following the meeting. An agenda of the meeting can be found on the Agendas, Meetings, and Minutes page of the city's website. This meeting is for information and discussion purposes only, and no decisions will be made this evening. Council will make a decision on these matters at the regular council meeting to be held this Thursday, December the 9th at 1:30 p.m. If you wish to address council at that meeting as well, you must submit a delegation form to the city clerk no later than 2 p.m. on Tuesday. A delegation form is available on the city's website. Due to the nature of a virtual meeting, the public has been asked to submit a request to speak in advance to allow for pre-meeting tests with the IT department. Those wishing to make a presentation will join the meeting via video conference, while those wishing to provide comments or answer questions only will call into the meeting via telephone. When recognized by the chair to speak, you must provide your name and address for the public record before giving comments. Only the applicant or people who provide oral or written comments regarding the application are entitled to appeal council's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Please keep your comments to planning matters only and avoid repeating comments that have already been expressed. If you have not provided oral or written comments, but wish to receive formal notice of council's decision on the matter, please contact the clerk's office. The notice will provide further information on appealing the decision. The planner will be asked to present the planning report for each application. The applicant will then be provided an opportunity to make comments, followed by those wishing to speak in favor of the application, and then followed by those wishing to speak in opposition to the application. Prior to proceeding with the first application, does anyone wish to declare a pecuniary interest on any items on tonight's agenda? And I believe, Councillor Accioni, you had a conflict?
Yes, I do. Declare a potential real estate interest on agenda item number BZN 8-21-10, application for zone change for 525 Grant Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So noted. Any further conflicts of interest? Seeing none, we'll proceed to our first planning application tonight. It is OP 2115-8 and ZN 821-17. Application for official planned amendment and zone change, additional residential units, City of Woodstock. And I'll call on our planner. Oh, Mr. Huff, you'll be dealing with this one tonight. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just for people watching at home, my name is Gord Huff. I'm the Director of Community Planning at the County of Oxford, and I will be presenting these applications for consideration tonight. So these applications were initiated by the City of Woodstock for the purpose of updating policies and zoning provisions regarding what we call additional residential units. And I'll explain that a little bit more as we go through the presentation. So for the purpose of the presentation, Madam Chair, I'm just going to kind of break it up into three parts. I want to do just a very brief background as to how we got here with the amendments that we're talking about tonight. Then I want to talk a bit about the official plan amendments and the zoning bylaw amendments, the draft provisions that we come up with in consultation from the process we've gone through to date, and then our next steps, what we expect to do next from here after we're finished. So with respect to background, Bill 108 was the More Homes, More Choices Act, was approved by the province in September of 2019. Included measures and a lot of amendments to various legislations and regulation introductions to increase housing options in Ontario as a whole by increasing supply, by assisting in implementing measures that would assist in affordability. And one of those things was something we call an additional residential unit, which is basically a second unit in an existing residential development. These legislation and the policies that the province has provided require municipalities to enact policies and zoning provisions that would authorize these additional residential units, or ARUs, as I'll call them from here on in low density housing forms like single detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, and townhouses. The provincial direction attached to this legislation and policy is very clear that the expectation with these would be implemented broadly across communities in Ontario with very limited areas or very limited limitations around things like hazards, floodplains, erosion, or situations where servicing capacities just can't accommodate these things, and that is the case in some municipalities. Staff have recommended through the course of this process following this broad approach, and just would note to you that we've had meetings and reports that have come before this council on 3 different occasions in the fall of 2020 and 2 times in the spring of 2021. Really, those reports were identified a lot of different issues, and they're attached to the overall package that we've prepared for council's consideration. But they contain a lot of detail with respect to the consideration of implementing official plan policy zoning provisions in Woodstock for these types of units in Woodstock. And as such, I'm not going to go back over top of those. The focus of my discussion from here on in will be on the amendments to the official plan and the zoning bylaws. So now, before jumping into that, in May of 2021. Resolution of council upon considering our staff report of that evening was to pursue an approach in Woodstock that rather than the broad approach that we have been recommending, looking at it a bit more selectively on the basis of either neighborhood characteristics and densities, or with a view to phasing in the implementation of additional residential units across the community in a way that would focus primarily, or initially at least, on the neighborhoods within the city that have already been experienced or have experienced historically that higher density type of development, the multi-unit residentials, and so that is where we kind of moved forward. And then from there, we initiated these applications, went through the process, provided public notice, established a website, and effectively attempted to try to get feedback through the course of the last number of months from not just agencies, but also from the public on these issues. So we have received a number of comments from the public. Part of this meeting here tonight is to gather any further information the public wishes to provide to us before we make any final determinations about these where these amendments are going to go. So, Madam Chair, from there, with respect to the official plan amendment that's been drafted, we took a very high-level approach, enabling type policies reflective of the provincial direction, includes a comprehensive suite of review criteria to inform and support the city's development of appropriate zoning provisions by which these additional residential units will be established in the city over time. The policies allow for we think are broad enough. They allow for a lot of different approaches, and certainly for detailed local direction from the city, such as where these will be permitted and what standards would apply to them in the neighborhoods where they're going to be allowed. So the draft policies principally affects the low density residential policies in the official plan, and we've included in those new policies a section that very specific policies for additional residential units. Again, the report that in front of you, the report that's of the date for this coming December, or this coming council meeting on December the 9th, has a lot of the detail of those in here, but I'm just going to run through quickly a few of the items that of interest that We've built into the official plan policies the requiring the city to establish the appropriate zoning provisions to allow additional residential units in single detached, semi-detached, and townhouse dwellings in keeping with the provincial legislation is built into those policies. And where the city is satisfied that various development review criteria can be met. And some of that criteria includes the maximum number of units that be permitted on a lot. One is permitted in a residential dwelling, and others potentially permitted in an accessory structure. That any increased demand for on-street parking, nearby streets can be adequately addressed. ARUs must be clearly secondary and subordinate to the principal dwelling on the property, and the lot and limited in size in both from a percentage basis and in terms of floor area. Dwellings and lots on which these are to be considered are to be large enough to accommodate the ARUs and provide for adequate parking, landscape and outdoor amenity areas to accommodate the people who will be living in the units on the property. There's criteria built around ensuring that any exterior renovations are done in a way that does not negatively impact on the character of the neighborhood. Not just the dwelling property itself, but the overall neighborhood in general. Not permitted in dwellings where there's already an accessory unit permitted, or other uses that are accessory to the residential, such as a bed and breakfast, in order to limit the amount of opportunity to affect parking. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, infrastructure, public services, impacts and environmental constraints, natural features, and those sorts of things are also considered. We also conclude policies that speak to additional review criteria for these types of units that would be in ancillary structures. Again, the criteria is built largely around limiting the potential for these units to affect privacy, visual, other impacts on abutting residential properties, and compatible in character with the property on when it's located, as well as the broader neighborhood. One item, probably one of the more important components of the policies we drafted, is that the expectation is that the implementation of additional residential units going forward would be implemented through a comprehensive city-initiated amendment to the bylaw or the zoning of new plans of subdivision. So this would mean that basically site-specific amendments for additional residential units going forward in areas that wouldn't be identified as being in this first phase, for lack of better terminology, would generally not be permitted according to these policies. So staff are of the opinion that the attached policies that I've been talking about here are generally consistent with the policies of the provincial government in respect to the implementation of additional residential units. They authorize these types of units in the types of dwellings that are identified in the provincial legislation. And again, very high level policies, but we're satisfied that they do the trick for to be able to provide that level of consideration by the city of Woodstock in developing zoning provisions for this. So moving to the zoning bylaw, Madam Chair, that again, I'm just to reiterate that the approach that planning staff have supported through the course of this is taking that broader approach. However, going back to that May resolution, City Council was very clear in the direction that they wanted to look at this, not implement them broadly initially in the city of Woodstock. They wanted to look at it more selectively. I've spoken to that to some extent, and I think the zoning provisions that we built here are based on that direction. That phased approach. We looked at things like the neighborhood characteristics. We looked at the density provisions as being tools to potentially identify areas that would be supported. But we felt that the phased approach and focusing on areas of the city that identified or have been identified in the past as for multi-unit residential development. And a lot of those areas are in and around the city core, or the residential areas surrounding the city core. And I'm actually going to share a map just for briefly here, Madam Chair. So you see here, and what we've identified is the areas of the city that are zoned R2, and some of the areas right in the immediate vicinity of the downtown that are zoned C3.
It didn't share, Gord, excuse me.
Oh, it's not sharing?
No.
Oh, sorry. I'm gonna see what I did here. Try it again. Oh, it's because I didn't share it. Just bear with me for just a second here, please.
Okay.
Okay. There we go.
There we go.
I can see us sharing. Okay, so again, these areas you see in blue and to a lesser extent, this kind of beige color are the areas that are zoned R2 and C3 in the city of Woodstock. The R2 zone actually currently allows 2-unit residential development in the form of converted dwellings. The zoning provisions that we've established, I'm going to talk a bit more about those, but actually replace the converted dwelling provisions with the additional residential units. The biggest impact there is that converted dwellings require larger lot areas and frontages. The additional residential units will be basically established in accordance with the zoning provisions for that currently exist in the R2 zone for singles or semis. But they do have to meet all the requirements of the bylaw in terms of parking, landscaped open space in the front yard, and so on and so forth. But this map here basically depicts the areas that were identified by using just the R2 zones and the C3 zones. And you see that, this area here, where my cursor is more or less the main core of the downtown, and the blue areas and the areas in the taupe color are the areas that would be immediately affected by this. So I'm going to stop sharing this. So we went with this approach, more the phased approach as opposed to the residential neighborhood approach, Madam Chair, largely because when you get beyond the areas that I showed you on those maps into the broader areas of the city that are primarily characterized by single detached dwellings, there's really not much to choose from. There probably is if you went and did the detailed work around, if you started identifying characteristics around maybe commercial nodes, and but we haven't done that here. We thought that as first phase approach that using the R2 zoning and by extension the C3 zone, which allows uses in the R2 zone, by the way, as being the kind of the first step for implementation here. And those residential neighborhoods, like I said, those single attached residential neighborhoods really don't have much diversity in housing. They haven't experienced that. They very much are characterized by having very similar characteristics from neighborhood to neighborhood. We just felt it wasn't the appropriate way to go. So from a zoning bylaw, in terms of the phasing in of these ARUs, again, limiting the ARUs, the number of ARUs permitted on a lot. The zone would again be the R2 zone, and by extension the C3 zone, which permits those uses in the uses that are allowed in the R2 zone. They'd be permitted in accordance with the lot area and frontage provisions of the R2 zone, together with provisions that we've built into the bylaw. You'll see in the draft that are a number of general provisions that would be specific to the implementation of additional residential units. And some of those things include again, the maximum number of units, the limiting the floor area, as I mentioned earlier. There's provisions specific to that in here. Parking. The requirement of the provincial legislation is that you are required to accommodate one additional parking space for each additional residential unit, and that would be accommodated here as well. Maintaining the 50% front yard in landscaped open space that must remain landscaped and cannot be used for parking. Also, again, provisions into the zoning bylaw that we'll probably be looking at more closely over the course of the next month, but we've certainly looking at things that would limit the visual impact of some of the changes that may take place. And for additional residential units that would be in accessory structures, we've actually included in the zoning bylaw right now a minimum lot area for those, that notwithstanding what I said earlier about the R2 zone provisions, is that to establish that second unit in an accessory structure, the expectation would be a minimum of 1,000 square meter lot area. And that reason for that large lot area is that because when you're establishing a second essentially building. It's no different than a garden suite. And we have provisions in our official plan now for those sorts of units, and the numbers are very similar. And the idea being is that you want to make sure you're providing space for coverage, for amenity space, parking, all those things. So that's the kind of the rationale behind that. We have received comments from agencies that are included in the report. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those, other than to tell you that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing have not provided comments yet. They have indicated they're going to provide comments before January, but not before this meeting. So we don't have those available for you. So we will certainly have them to you when we get our hands on them. From a next step perspective, these draft policies, again, I believe are consistent with the direction the province has provided on these, and we're satisfied that the policy direction that we've chosen is suitable. Once again, I've said this many times, but from a staff perspective, we certainly supportive of the broad approach to implementation of these, but in keeping with the city's direction, I believe that taking the phased approach is something that we can support in the context of the city implementing this in that truly phased approach, that we will monitor this over a fairly, I would suggest we want to select a period of time and review it with a view to looking at, are there other areas over the course of perhaps a 2-year period that the monitoring and the impacts that are such that we can look at other areas of the city. So on that basis, we're looking at bringing these, we've included the comments we've received in the report, we'll be entertaining further comments as this process unfolds further. But the expectation is that we're not really asking council to make any decisions about these amendments on December the 9th. This being part of the public process that we're going through right now, we want to gather all of that input and then use it to come back to council in January of 2022 with amendments for them to consider for adoption. So those are my comments, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you. I just have two myself. I'm going to start off with, so we shouldn't be concerned then with not hearing from the ministry, because this is we're only going to accept the report on Thursday, and we'll wait to go further until January. Is that correct?
Yes, at this point, the ministries, they're obligated. We asked them for comments in August, and we still don't have them. All we have from them is that we're not going to have comments to you by December the 6th. But the short answer to your question is yes, we will. There's still plenty of opportunity for that to happen, and we will be following up with them to determine when those comments might be available.
And just further to the 2-year period that you're proposing, just to monitor the issue and revisit it, what will the process be in 2 years when you go to revisit it?
Well, the whole process at this point, the 2 years was something I suggested. I mean, we haven't really established that. We'll probably bring that forward with part of the final amendments with some consideration, maybe a resolution for council to consider it too. But suggesting if the 2-year period was selected, for example, I think what we would do is we would monitor the types of the development that through the permitting process over that 2-year period, and look at, keep an eye on things like the parking, all these other things we've talked about in here. How are they affecting neighborhoods that they're in? And we would come back with, probably we'd have to start looking at neighborhoods that if it works here, what other neighborhoods, and I made mention this a little bit earlier in my presentation, that, are there selected areas around the city that might be suitable for this, that would not necessarily, when we talk phasing, maybe the next phase is looking at areas then around commercial core areas outside of the downtown. Maybe there's some of those areas out there that would be suitable for this type of development, and as they develop further, can support additional development, and in a way that doesn't negatively affect the neighborhoods in terms of traffic and parking and so on and so forth. So that's what I would envision.
Have any other municipalities done a phased in approach?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Accioni.
Thank you. Through to Gordon. It's no secret the county is very blunt that they believe the phased-in approach is not their first choice, which, looking at Brantford and many other places around here, it is fairly open I've had a lot of people in the last, I would say 2 weeks now, that have been quite disappointed that it isn't a broad approach, that we aren't looking at R1 as well, when that is the majority of the city. What process is it if people wanted to apply? Would they still go to the minor variance then? Like they still got those options? Is that, I guess, how is the county going to approach that? Is the question.
Okay, through you to that question, Madam Chair, it's not so much how the county is going to approach it, it's going to be how the city of Woodstock approaches it. Because when you make an application, I mean, the way we've structured these policies, the intent is that in coupled with that monitoring I talked about earlier, is that the matter would be reviewed comprehensively through a single review by the city of Woodstock. So you would basically site-specific amendments would be discouraged. Now, having said that, I mean, you can write policies about those things. There's legislation, when you look at the Planning Act, it's very difficult. You can't stop people from actually applying for things. The question becomes, you know, in the face of how we've structured our policies and how we want this to roll forward, you know, is that if someone were to file an application to amend an R1 zoned area to allow one of these things, they would actually have to, assuming that the city wouldn't support that based on what the policy would look like, based on what I've talked about here, if that's what the city ends up supporting, you know, that would be something that have to be tested. It's a difficult thing, but I think that, you know, the idea that you're going through the process in a way that you're implementing it, it's phased, but you're going to monitor that and you're going to come back and implement further through additional applications is, you know, it's an approach that I think can be considered appropriate.
I guess if I may, through the chair, I guess the reason I was asking about the county's approach is I would expect these to go to the tribunal, and like everything lately, they've been overturning the city of Woodstock. So I just feel like we're going to be wasting a whole bunch of money with the county being very clear of their opinion, the city being clear in some past votes of what they wanted to. So I'm just a little fearful that we're just opening ourselves up to far more expense than possible needed. So I guess that was why I was asking about the county's approach, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lauder?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Huff. I agree with the phased-in approach. I think that if we can get this through to this stage and go back and look at it in a period of time, whatever we might select it, and for when this is all finished. I know they talk about this as being affordable for affordable housing. My concern is that there's a lot of investors out there that are coming in and buying up our houses and our R1 houses, and then making them into two units that you can now do that, apartment and plus something in a shed. And so I think that it's just not giving our young people or first-time homeowners the ability to get into the market. So it's just a comment that I have, and that's what I've been thinking about, because I think of my grandchildren that have to be able to get into the market, and it's very difficult when everything is bidding higher and higher, and it's out-of-town investors. So that's a comment that I wanted to make. And I do have from Mr. Dorfman some things that he was concerned about. Will they be considered in when the final official plan amendments are done? And the zoning, will they be taken into consideration, any of those, or is it pretty well clear as to what you're going to, it'll be the way it is now that will be presented to us?
Madam Chair, through you to that question, we will be taking under consideration all of the comments we received.
Okay, and he did mention that the proposed table additional residential units should be deferred until the official plan amendment is approved and in effect. Do you agree with that, or is that something that should go all together, be done at the same time?
Madam Chair, that's technically how we do the process anyway. The official plan would be
Okay.
approved ultimately first before the zoning bylaw would actually be presented to. We do these, like all our applications, together, but the actual process is that because there's an official plan amendment, this County of Oxford has to approve that first
Right.
prior to the zoning bylaw being adopted by the city.
Okay, and we are the only one in the county so far that has even looked at this. There has been no presentations made to any of the townships or Tillsonburg or Ingersoll
Madam
regarding
Chair,
any change.
there has been some preliminary discussions with Ingersoll. They have received the initial report, the same sort of initial report you would have received last November.
Okay.
In 2020, and I believe a report is going forward to Tillsonburg in a week's time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions from council? I just want to also state I'm very pleased, I think, along with Councillor Lauder, that the R1s aren't being considered at the present time. There's a lot of homeowners that bought in R1 areas because of the R1 zoning and want to keep it that way. And for those people just coming in and looking at investments and wanting to have more apartments, it's very hard for those of us and in the community that want to preserve the R1 areas and not have apartments in them. Anyways, I'll go on to Councillor Schadenberg.
Yeah, thanks a lot from the chair through to Gord Huff. I guess first of all, my question would be is if somebody in an R2 zoning area wants to put an accessory dwelling in their backyard, it would still have to, maybe this is equally also a question for Craig Wallace from the City of Woodstock Engineering Office, would still have to get a building permit and therefore go through the general ongoing inspections from a building inspector to sort of give final occupancy, et cetera along the way. So there would be other terms from them, plus maybe a fire inspection as well. So it wouldn't be as easily said as one might project even in the R2 zoning to go ahead and do this.
Yep.
Madam Chair, through you to the councillor, I can, if Craig wants to weigh in on that, but I would simply say that any of these units, regardless of where they're located, would be required to comply with the building code, fire code, all of that stuff is in play.
And I can clarify one of the items on page number 6 of your report where it said the ARUs and buildings accessory to a residential use will only be permitted on lots having a minimum lot area of 1,000 square meters or 10,765 square feet. That is quite a large lot to begin with at this point in time, as far as the starting points go for us, because, for example, traditionally up to say 6 or 7 years ago, a lot of the detached homes were built on lots that were 15 meters by 30 meters or 50 feet by 100 feet. And now with so many townhouses getting built or more semi-detached, it would be very difficult for any of those properties to qualify. In fact, even the 50 by 100 lots wouldn't qualify even if they were in an R2 zoning area, would they?
No, Madam Chair, it's true enough that most of the properties that are zoned R2 or C3 in the city are going to be difficult for them to comply with that 1,000 square meters. That number was selected, I think I mentioned earlier, was selected on the basis of really that we have a bit of a precedent in our current official plan policies for garden suites in urban areas. So fully serviced lots are still required to have a 10,000 square foot, or I think it's like 930 square meters is the actual figure. And it's really based on the idea that you have a second full building on the property that's accommodating a house. So you're talking about lot coverage. You want to make sure you got amenity space for all these people, parking, all of that stuff was the kind of the basis for why we selected that figure. But more to your point of your question is that in the R2 zone, it would be difficult to find lots that are of that size. My experience. Thanks.
I guess my next question might be for our building department and Craig Wallace. The whole idea behind building permits, not the whole idea behind building permits as far as the costs of them go, is to be able to have a cost recovery system. without thinking that there's going to be an explosion of this, you certainly are going to have to hire more property inspectors or building inspectors to be able to check things over stage by stage before a final occupancy is granted. Would you have any estimates whatsoever as to how that may progress for the city of Woodstock, Mr. Wallace?
Madam Chairman, through to the question, that's a hard question to answer. Based on the provisions, if they were approved today, I don't think we're going to be adding a lot of ARUs to our existing housing stock because it takes a special property to allow that ARU. So right now, with the phased-in approach, I don't see a huge impact on the building department.
Thank you. Anything
Thank you.
further, Councillor Schadenberg?
Yeah, I guess maybe my last question is just a general comment from Gord Huff from planning from Oxford County, because at different points in time, we've certainly had boundary adjustments that have either been approved or, as we've seen recently in the last year and a half or so, not approved boundary adjustments. But I think the city of Woodstock, and before anyone wants to start maybe pointing fingers at city council or whatnot, or even the planning department at that, has done quite a good job with recovery of brownfields and intensification in that direction from taking properties where churches used to be, for example, and putting in a townhouse complex, or renovating an old school or an old church into apartments. So I think as far as creating rental units, I think the city of Woodstock has done a lot in that direction already, and not so sure necessarily that we're getting applauded enough for it, but all those planning matters have gone through past your desk as well on Reeve Street. So just general comments on that, the intensification and provincial policy statement and all that, as far as where you see things might be going in the future, as far as, I guess, where I initially started, saving farmland and not doing a boundary adjustment versus more and more apartments and building up.
Madam Chair, I threw you to that. First of all, I agree we're doing a great job. I can't deny that, but in terms of, yes, I think Woodstock does, certainly we have developed, our Woodstock Council and staff have, and the developers themselves have developed a number of projects in Woodstock for higher density development that certainly is very much in keeping with the province and just planning in general, trying to utilize better the lands that are in your service settlements to better utilize existing resources, existing public services, water and sewer capacity, all of that stuff, all your parks and your libraries and all of those things. If you can do more of that on a smaller piece of property by going up, of course, that just helps. And I think that, in terms of the numbers of conversions of structures like churches that you mentioned, schools, all these things that have kind of fallen by the wayside over time because they've just fallen into the use is just different now. The demand for them is different than it's been. I think the utilization of a lot of those is probably, certainly in Oxford County, Woodstock has done probably the best job of any place of doing that. It's not to say, mostly because of volume. You have more of those opportunities here, you have more growth here, but taking advantage of those opportunities is certainly gone a long way to, I would say, satisfying the policies of the province, the county's official plan, and just again, good planning by utilizing these resources effectively. Thank you.
Is that everything, Councillor Schadenberg?
Sure, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Asheton, you had something further?
Yes, thank you. I guess more of a general statement as well, that I certainly can appreciate the other councillor concerns about the R1s, but I don't feel we're doing any long-term effect helping our housing issues right now here in the city of Woodstock, with the things that Councillor Schadenberg pointed out, with the problems with R2s, the restrictions and everything else. I do believe that there should be cases in R1s that are looked at with the possibility as ARUs. There's far more in R1 zoning that I think would be applicable and do better to be effective in the housing crisis we have right now, or the apartments and everything else, let alone the fact of, people being able to, young people trying to afford these houses by having an income possibilities. I'm just not convinced, and I'm just curious if the county thinks this will help with the phased-in approach at all with the housing crisis right now, in your opinion.
Madam Chair, again, I would suggest that what we've said from the get-go on this is that the broad application of this would certainly be, would be more in keeping with what the province expects. In terms of satisfying housing needs through this, I would only suggest that you're right. We're implementing these in areas where 2-unit dwellings are already permitted.
Existing, yeah.
The difference being is that at least the provisions are lessened somewhat, because right now for a converted dwelling in an R2 or even a semis and duplexes require, I believe it's 18 meters of frontage and 540 square meters. Whereas now if you have a R2 zone property with less, say 12 meters of frontage, and as long as you can meet those provisions of the bylaw, particularly for parking, there's more opportunity there that's created than would perhaps in the past. Again, as a phased-in approach, what you're doing is you're phasing, and is it a quick enough phase? Would I like to see it more? Maybe 1 year is a better solution than 2 years of monitoring. Maybe in the meantime we start reviewing some of those areas I suggested earlier. These are all things that we can look at with council direction. But certainly from the county's perspective, I mean, in terms of, from a county perspective, we're really providing you planning advice as the city of Woodstock. We're trying to help you get to achieve your goals as the city as well. But we would really like to see any solutions that we can to increase housing supply. And appreciate the comments earlier, but it's not always necessarily affordable. But sometimes it's just a housing supply question. It's not affordable in the sense that it's more attainable housing, but you're providing additional housing, and that's the aside from the affordable issue, that's the other part of the crisis that we're experiencing, is that, and it's happening everywhere, is that there just needs to be more housing for people, and you want to be able to try to do that in situations. So for my comments to Councillor Schadenberg about the the use of our higher density and the development of higher density development. These are all things that contribute to that, right? You're trying to not use up, trying not to expand your boundaries unnecessarily. So that's kind of a long way of getting around to the point that the more housing, the better that we can provide in a way that fits into your community. I think that's the other part of it too. We have to be cognizant of the fact that you can't just completely ignore the fact that you've got communities that have developed over periods of time. And it's not to say that they shouldn't be subject to some change over time, but that change, I think, has to be measured.
Yeah. Does the county see a way that maybe there's a way to approve certain R1s with applications, if it went that way? Or is the opinion of just to do it as a staggered approach?
Madam Chair, once again, that's the approach we put in because we put that into the policies. We felt that was the direction that would be needed to implement what the city is trying to accomplish here. If the city were to opt out of that particular policy and entertain more site-specific applications, that would be something that we would still apply the remainder of the policies to. But you're going to then be. I think the goal here is to try to do this more comprehensively, as opposed to, having a deluge of independent site-specific applications in front of you. So that's kind of the goal of why that policy was written that way.
I guess that's where I'm fearful with people. The people that approached me, anyways, they do want this. They do certainly. 3 or 4 of them come to mind that it would not affect the neighborhood whatsoever, lots of parking, et cetera, that I can see would certainly suit for it. But in saying that, I can also appreciate the neighborhoods and everything else. So I don't know. I just don't think we're doing anything with what we've got proposed right now with the ARUs. I don't see them adding anything except more paperwork. I guess I'm a little disappointed right now that we aren't doing a more broad approach. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors wish to speak to this? My comment is, as usual, the province, problems for the larger centers and then forcing it on the smaller municipalities, but I'll have that argument with them forever. So is that the end of your presentation, Mr. Huff? Are you leaving us after this and we're back to Andrea, or?
Yes, then I'm going, you get the star. get the star of the show. I'm out.
Okay. Seeing as there are no further questions for you, thank you very much for the report and answering all the questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Going on, our second application this evening is ZN 82110, application for zone change 525 Brant Street, Woodstock General Hospital Trust. And I'll call on our planner, Andrea Hackler, to describe it to us, please.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks. So this application for zone change, council has seen this site several times at this point in time. So we won't spend too much time on it. It's an application for zone change, and basically what they're proposing to do is to satisfy a condition of a recent severance that was approved. As council can see, and sorry, just for anyone that's not familiar with the site, this is the former Woodstock Hospital site. And so as council can see, there's this portion of land was recently severed from this portion of land. And this portion of land will be dedicated at some point in time to the city for future park use. And so currently these two small northern parcels are zoned R3, so a residential zone, a special residential zone. And now that they've been added to this larger park parcel, we'd like to rezone them so that they have the same zoning as the rest of the park parcels. So an active use open space zone. And it has a special provision just basically because there's a narrower frontage than with the generally what the open space zone allows for. And so the zoning, the rezone staff are supportive of. It's going to reflect the intended use. We like to see consistent zoning across a larger parcel. We don't like to have split zoning just because it allows for the use to take place on the entire parcel. And so the zoning is in keeping with the underlying designation, the official plan designation, which is low density residential. And the adding these two parcels doesn't affect the zoning, the OS 2-4 zoning. So in light of that, if council has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I do think we've seen this parcel many times. So I would recommend that this application be approved.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions of council? And we have no delegations registered for this application either, Andrea. So I think we'll continue on. Our next application this evening, and thank you for that. Next application is OP 21098 and ZN 82111. It's an application for official plan amendment and zone change, which is Main Street, and it's by 2653009 Ontario, Inc. Andrea, would you like to describe it, please?
Thank you. Share my screen here again.
Thank you.
And so this application for official plan amendment and zone change is for a number of parcels that the applicant has assembled. And so it affects property 80 Wellington Street South, so property on Wellington Street, property on Main Street, and then property on Reeve Street. And then I'll just move to the proposed site plan. So the applicant is proposing an official plan amendment for these lands. And what they're looking to do is redesignate the subject lands from an entrepreneurial district to an entrepreneurial district with site-specific policies. And the site-specific policies would allow for an increase in density to 190 units per hectare or 77 units per acre. And then it would also allow for an increase in height to 8 stories. Currently, what is permitted under the entrepreneurial district would be 4 stories. And so they're looking to increase that to 8 stories. And then further to that, the applicant has also applied for a zone change from the entrepreneurial district zone, so C3, to a special residential zone 4, so an R4 special, and that would facilitate an 8-story apartment building with 56 residential units. I think I actually have there we go. Those are the building elevations of what's being proposed. And so then there's a site-specific zoning that the applicant is proposing, and that would address a number of deficiencies that that have come up through the process. And so they would need relief from lot area, frontage, rear yard depth, interior and exterior side yard depth, or side yard width, sorry, and visitor and accessible parking spaces. So the proposal is that the lands would be, or the property would be accessed by a one-way entry from Wellington Street South. And then there would also be a two-way entrance and exit onto Reeves Street. And the proposal is that there would be parking on at the ground level, as well as obviously north of the building. The overall size of the property is 0.73 acres. And so as I indicated, the current designation is Entrepreneurial District. And so within the Entrepreneurial District, that's part of our central area in Woodstock, so part of our larger downtown. It's made up of two parts. So it's Central Business District is the more downtown core, so more Dundas Street. And in the Central Business District, you're allowed to have medium and high density residential. And then in the Entrepreneurial District designation, it's more of like a step back where you're allowed to have, or the policies allow for medium and low density residential. And so in the Entrepreneurial District, you usually find like a mix of single, semis, towns, and some low-rise apartment buildings. And so I'll get to the densities in a little bit just to give council an idea. And then, so the application was circulated to agencies as every application is. The Parks Department indicated there are a number of mature trees on the site. They were hoping that every effort possible could be taken to retain those trees. If not, through the site plan approval process, they would require a tree inventory. And then there would be compensation, obviously, for any removals. And the engineering department also indicated that the application would be subject to site plan approval, where we would review things such as service and grading, stormwater management, sight lines, traffic, and whatnot. And the building department indicated that they were generally supportive of the application. They generally were supportive of the requested relief. They did indicate, however, that with respect to the fire route, they requested that the applicant it would occur likely through the site plan approval process, that they review the requirements for exits and fire access routes, as well as the main entrance. And so that would be looked at a later time. And then through the public consultation process, we did receive a number of letters from neighboring property owners. And those letters have been attached to the report for council's consideration. The concerns raised by the neighboring property owners generally related to the overall height, so the massing, compatibility with the surrounding dwellings, shadowing, traffic, parking, garbage, and snow removal, as well as sight lines. And so as I indicated, those are attached for consideration. So overall, our review of the application is, although as we spoke earlier with Mr. Huff, this is a form of intensification and infill housing. However, planning department did not feel that this is a form of development that adequately considers or reflects the local conditions of this area. So it doesn't comply with the central area policies or the entrepreneurial policies, or the general direction for the downtown core or the greater downtown core. The provincial policy statement promotes downtown vitality. So in our opinion, a higher density development such as this one should be more promoted in the central business district as opposed to the entrepreneurial district, where the densities and the heights are supposed to be phased out and move more to the lower density residential on the outskirts, obviously, of the downtown eventually. And the policies generally for the entrepreneurial district are that, as I indicated before, they're lower densities. So they support duplexes, semi-detached dwellings, duplexes, and low-rise apartment buildings. So based on that, with respect, then if we move to the official plan policies, we also have concerns with the overall scale and massing of this building. An 8-story building up against singles and semis and duplexes. This actual city block, there's no dwelling exceeds 2 stories. And so although the proposal meets the requirements for a shadowing study in that it doesn't shadow a neighboring property it doesn't shadow more than 50% of the property for more than 4 hours in the winter months, this area did not ever anticipate, these property owners would not have ever anticipated being beside an 8-story building. Whereas in the central business district, that's something that's more contemplated and you know, that's the direction and the intent for that area. And then with respect to the density, I indicated that I would speak to this. So the density that the applicant is proposing is like I said, 190 units per hectare or 77 units per acre. So just to give council an idea, the low and medium density residential designations allow for a maximum of, for the low density, it's 9 to 12 units per acre. And then for the medium density, it's 13 to 30 units per acre. In the high density designation, the policies allow for up to 60 units per acre. And again, they're proposing 77 units per acre. So we felt that although again, it's intensification and it's infill, it's using an underutilized site, we felt that perhaps for this location, it's perhaps an overdevelopment for the area. And then finally, the final point I wanted to make was that the application is part of an area that falls within the Woodstock Central Area Design Study. So council will recall that there were a central area design study that was undertaken, and actually there were sections of the design study that were implemented by OPA 198 in 2016. And so this site is indicated in the study specifically, and it speaks to having a gateway building. And so something that, you know, that signifies that you've arrived into the downtown. In this case, yeah, so then I looked further into the study, and I noted that although it's supposed to be a gateway building, it doesn't suggest that it exceed the height for this area. And so it suggests that this area has maximum heights. They maintain them at 4 stories. And so I would suggest then upon that review that again, the 8 stories exceeds what is contemplated for this area. So based on our review, from a planning perspective, we don't feel that this application can be supported, and we would recommend that council not approve the applications.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm go to council now. Any questions for Andrea regarding this application? Councillor Schadenberg?
Yeah, from our chair through to Andrea. I guess my question would be, talk about the number of units per acre that are allowed, and 8 stories versus whatever number of stories for a building. Does square footage of the apartment ever come into, for example, if they were all 400 square feet smaller apartments or 500 square feet smaller apartments, the building obviously itself would be much smaller as well. Does that ever play into it? Number of bedrooms in the building, number of square footage per unit? Versus just the amount of units per acre?
Andrea?
Through the chair to Councillor Schadenberg. No, we don't generally take a look at the square footage. It still counts as units per acre, so it still contributes to that density.
Any other questions, Councillor Schadenberg?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a delegation, and if they don't mind, I'm just going to go by first names, so I don't wreck their last names. We have Corby, Ram, Iqbal, Nikolai, and Michael with us as well. Did any of them wish to make any comments on the application? Corby?
Yes, good evening, Madam
Thank
Chair. It just speak to the start of this. My firm, SPH Engineering, has been taking the lead on this project, and our background is specifically structural, mechanical, electrical, and the civil component of this. And this project demands the architectural component as well as a planner to be on board with this. So I've brought those members of our team along with us tonight to speak to more of the specifics of that. So I see Mr. Martin has put up his screen here. So if you want to talk to that specifically, Michael, I'd invite you to do that.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, thank you very much. So I did prepare the planning justification report that's on file for this application. And I think we've heard a good overview here on what the application is. So I just wanted to point out a few of the key items that I'd outlined in my report. And we also have the architects here to speak to any specifics of the design. But really what the purpose of this application is to take advantage of, and I'm glad that we heard that discussion about the gateway to the downtown. It really is seeking to achieve the policies of the official plan and the provincial policy statement, seeing this location as a gateway opportunity as you're moving from a lower density residential area to the south. You come into the industrial area that's around the rail tracks. And then as you're moving into the downtown, you have this location where we see it sitting on an arterial road and a collector, an intersection where Wellington is an arterial and Main is a collector. And it provides us an opportunity where we can see we have the buffering to the south that's provided by the rail tracks and the industrial lands. And it really provides us with that opportunity to recognize this area while there is existing low density residential. This is still part of that central area of Woodstock, which isn't designated specifically for particular residential densities. So there is an official plan schedule which identifies areas that have target, whether it's low, medium residential density. This area is left out of that because it does fall within the entrepreneurial district. So I see this as an opportunity location where there's not necessarily a one unique location in any municipality that will have no challenges, whether it comes to compatibility or other concerns that may come up. But this really does provide that chance. So I did want to run through a few of the key policies that I think when I was looking at this application and proposal, and that came up when I provided my recommendations and findings in my justification report. So I don't know that it's necessary for me to go through. I'm willing to go through any discussion about the local context, what's in the surrounding area, those types of things. But I think I would like to just get to the meat of the discussion around the provincial policy statement and the official plan. So the official plan is really the key document that we're focusing on here. I think it's the key document that staff focused on in preparing their staff report. So what we see is this area does fall within the central area as designated on Schedule W1 of the official plan. When we look at Schedule W2, this is where the Entrepreneurial District overlay comes in. Schedule W4, it does show a couple of interesting items. It shows that there is a park proposed in this location. And I think I may share my screen if that's okay. I believe that I'm able to do that just to show some of these figures that I'm referring to so that perhaps it's not so vague what I'm trying to point to. So just give me one second here. So what I'm pulling up here now to share with you, and I'll just zoom out quickly. And allow me just to move. This is Schedule W3 of the official plan. And this is where I had referred to earlier. So I'll just zoom in on our location. We're here at Main and Wellington. So a couple items that we're seeing here is a park location identified. And this is where I'd indicate there's no specific densities that have been identified on this plan. So just moving over to the legend, this is where the target areas for low, medium, and high density residential have been identified. So in this location, in my opinion, that's where we're seeing this does correspond with that entrepreneurial district, and understanding that while there are low density residential uses and we see other types of uses, that there is opportunity to look at what may be an appropriate use on site specific basis. So there was the mention about the 2011 study that was done that identified this site as a gateway location. So I think as looking at what works here as specifically falling into a box of a 4-story cat being the absolute maximum we can look at. And I think I will point quickly to the shadow studies, but I do agree that the shadow studies showed that they do fall within the criteria in terms of shadow impact. So I think when you consider whether that 8 stories is triggering an adverse impact, that's just one consideration. But for me, really the main question is how do we put as many people as we can reasonably do so in this downtown area, this central district, and it's a balancing of residential development and commercial development, and seeking opportunities to be, if we're located near transit or areas where we want to see transit develop, areas that are walkable to particular areas of the downtown and of the central district, and those are key. So as I mentioned as well, Wellington Street is an arterial road. Main Street is a collector. So just to note, these are locations where we expect to see some increased level of intensification. In terms of the zoning, we've heard that it is in the entrepreneurial C3 zone, seeking to amend that to permit this use. So in terms of the development proposal, I would like to share with you a quick. We have seen the elevations. I do have one item that was shared with me by the architect, and it is a perspective of what this building will look like. And I think it will help just to frame it, I think, in terms of any questions we may have architecturally, site layout, and overall how this is going to look. So a few items just to mention. We do see a significant portion of the parking area screened underneath the building. I'm just going to play this as I'm speaking. So what we could see is how it's presenting itself to Main Street. We could see the parking below grade, how that's screened, landscape opportunities that are there to street level. Again, there is some surface parking that is uncovered, but for the most part, we see that there is a significant amount of cover. Attention has been given to building articulation, roof height, elements like that. As I mentioned, the architect is here to discuss that as necessary, but there's definitely been a considerable amount of attention given to the architectural quality, the materials. There was an urban design brief that was prepared that explained how this building will fit in with the architectural character of the area. So from a policy perspective, and I will try to be as brief as I can, and I know it's just from a provincial policy statement, I know I did hear some discussion in the previous meeting about what the province will do, what the province is expecting, those types of things. I do take the PPS as that framework the municipality is working within, and that it doesn't necessarily trump what's going on at the local level. But just again, when we're here looking at policies such as efficient land use patterns, promoting efficient development that seeks the financial well-being of the municipality, seeking to minimize consumption of land. And I did hear that discussion earlier about avoiding new settlement areas, expansion, having to seek new land opportunities. Really are working in an area here that's on that periphery of the downtown, providing that gateway opportunity. From the perspective of the official plan, I would point to the municipal development strategy that's in section 7.1. So it speaks to items such as efficient land use patterns, sensitive intensification, variety of shelter. So again, here what we're seeing are types of units that aren't currently available in this location. Obviously, land use compatibility, But the ones that jump out at me are the importance of this central area. So this is where it speaks to how the central area will be the most functionally diverse area of the city and the county. So it's taking it out to that upper tier level. So the policies that it indicates are designed to promote residential development and employment uses in the central area. So again, I think balancing those off, you need people downtown to support the employment and commercial. So it can't be just residential. It can't just be employment and commercial uses. So we need to see people living in these areas and being down there and relying on the services and infrastructure that are there 7 days a week. And then there's also the policy about multimodal transportation system. So again, the more people we can get living in the central area, living on arterials and collector roads with transit service, the more we're going towards that direction of having a more functional multimodal system. From the perspective of section 7.2, which is housing development in residential areas, we see policies relating to accommodating housing demand, facilitating choice of housing. So that's tenure, type, cost, location. So here we're seeing an opportunity to put different types of units in that downtown and central area location. Compatible development, again, compatible does not necessarily mean the same. So in my planning justification report, I went into the discussion of how we see buffering provided by the rail corridor, how the shadow study shows that the height can be accommodated without significantly intrusive shadow throughout the day. And there's just many elements. We look at parking, in this case, we have a parking standard of 1 space per unit. So we're not trying to provide a severe reduction. What we're really providing is the downtown parking requirement without the additional visitor element placed on top of that. From a residential intensification perspective, again, seeking opportunities to increase the variety of dwelling types in this location, neighborhood mix, and then overall, there's the concept of promoting residential intensification in this location. Now, this isn't a high density residential area, but you did hear the note that this would qualify as high density residential on the basis of density. So there are policies in section 7.2.6 of the official plan that I had flagged that spoke to criteria that you look at when you're looking at new opportunities for high density residential. And so in that section, there's a note about six criteria, and 3 of those criteria were that they constitute community landmarks or reference points, support the functionality of the municipal transit system, and support the viability and functionality of the central area. So for me, this is a proposal that supports those policies, looking at this as a previously identified gateway opportunity. We see the transit system support that the additional density and walkability would provide. So we do have sidewalks on both sides of the streets in this location that facilitate that movement as well. And then finally, as I indicated, the opportunity to have more people living here. So I didn't mention at the beginning, but I do live in Oakville, and I've lived in London in the past, a number of locations. And the challenge that I've seen is with people not living in the downtown, they come downtown for business or to work, and then they leave. And what that means for evenings and weekends. So I think any opportunity to provide people living in these locations to support those services and infrastructure at all times. So then again, still within this idea of high density residential, another criteria was that development results in transition from low profile residential buildings to higher profile residential buildings and vice versa. So again, we're seeing south of the rail corridor, we see a low density residential, and really moving into this the central area with this site providing an opportunity to represent that transition into the downtown area. And again, just trying to move through. I know this was a long report for me because I did find a lot of policies in the official plans that were worth digging into. I know staff have taken a detailed look, but then again, driveways and parking areas fall under section 7.2.8.2. Again, ones that I flagged there, that there's criteria for partial screening of parking areas, which we've done here. Access and integration of developments. So this is where it speaks to having multiple access points to the development. So when we looked at the site plan, we saw that there are opportunities to enter from one side of the property, exit out to the other. So we're not combining all activity to that one access point. Similar as section 7.2.8.3 relates to pedestrian activity. So again, I've noted that we have sidewalks on all sides of the property that allow for movement of pedestrians from and to the property and into that wider central area. They provide landscape boulevards to help not only with elements like drainage and snow storage, but also that transition from public to private realm and the comfort of that pedestrian environment. So again, there's sections on landscaping. Again, for me, some of these items get into more site plan approval basis. So I am trying to stay higher level on the real policies of density, height, nature of use. So I wanted to point out section 7.3 of the official plan. This speaks to economic development and employment lands. And the reason I bring this up is that relationship of people living in the central area versus what that means for economic growth. So the policies that are in this section speak to increasing economic strength, having a balanced assessment of property tax, seeing the central area as a community focal point, and maintaining the central area viability. So for me, what I wrote down when I read this is that we need people in the central area to support these objectives. We need people living here, that which helps increase the residential tax assessment, but it also supports growth in commercial and employment uses, which will then help bring that balance of the employment. So I don't see one coming without the other. And because this isn't a central location, this isn't a specifically identified residential zone or specifically identified employment zone. That mix of uses working together to achieve these objectives, I think, is important. The specific policies of the central area are 7.3.2, but what they really speak to is the area as a multifunctional center. So this is where it's speaking about the diversity of this area for business, culture, administration area, and then also a range of uses that include the residential intensification in this area. And then specifically the residential function of the central area is a section 7.3.2.2.2, but this speaks to freestanding residential. So it has indicated that you can have freestanding medium and high density residential without requiring a commercial component, as long as it's falling within the criteria here is the pedestrian predominant area. But I think what we're trying to point out here is this increase in density, the availability of pedestrian infrastructure, and that this gateway area to the downtown really does support this idea of having people living on the property and moving into the CBD areas it's defined here. So the entrepreneurial, I think I'll close with the entrepreneurial district discussion that we have here and what that means. Again, there's policies for new development under the entrepreneurial district, and it's really speaking to development that meets these other criteria that we've been speaking to. So seeking to see new uses that come in, whether it's a high density residential, different types of uses that are the appropriate servicing on the property. There's always other considerations that have been addressed, compatibility. But that's what I really addressed in my planning justification report and what I've tried to lay out here. So my recommendations were that it was my opinion that the central area and the entrepreneurial district are appropriate locations for growth and development, but that this is that really a premier spot to see something a little more special, again, a little higher density, greater height, that's benefiting from that transitional area into the downtown. And it really is an opportunity to see this gateway development occur. And I think I'd welcome any questions instead of going too much more detail there, and also indicate that we have the architect and the engineer here with any specific detailed questions.
Councillor Petter.
Through Madam Chair to Michael. Michael, I want to congratulate you on trying to get a square peg into a round hole. Your presentation was fantastic, and I appreciate you doing your job and trying to justify this this building in this location. But quite honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I would never vote for 8 stories in that location. I think we will probably be fairly unanimous as a council on this. You threw a lot of 7.1s and 0.3s at me, and I appreciate all that. But as a layman and as a counselor, I don't really have to worry about all that stuff. I more worry about the fact that you mentioned sidewalks on both sides of the street. I'd like you to get on one of those sidewalks and look up and put 8 stories up there. Walk to the buildings that will still be there when you're done with that development and see what 8 stories would do to that corner. That corner, in case you haven't been there very much, I have, that 4-corner stop, the traffic is brutal. I can't imagine an area for your development any worse than that corner, to be honest with you. And I loved your animation. I loved your building, the architecture, and there are places in town I would love to see it. But man, I can tell you, that's not one of those locations. So in my opinion, I could be wrong, and maybe council is going to look at it a different way. But from my standpoint, that is definitely, that 8 stories is never going to wash on that corner. I think you need to sharpen your pencil and do a little redesign. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Petter. Councillor Accioni.
Thank you through the chair to Mr. Barton. Councillor Petter summed up a lot of what I wanted to bring up. I just happened to be at that intersection today, and just by fluke looked up and tried to visualize that, and I must have been 5 cars back as it was. I cannot imagine putting 8-story building there and the amount of people and everything else, unfortunately. I'm just curious then, has any thought been given to maybe a 3 or a 4-story? Not saying I necessarily even approve that myself, but has any thought been given to something a little bit more and a little closer to being appropriate for that area?
Mr. Barton.
Yes, I know that, and I may ask the architect to give some comment on this as well. I know what they've looked at is the potential to incorporate design here at different densities, different heights. I think what they're trying to achieve here is that balance between density and compatible built form. I don't want to speak to there's always a number of different elements that come into play in determining whether, and I did hear the previous question to staff about if you did smaller units and achieved more on a similar footprint versus doing larger units and having a smaller yield, but the building is still the same size. I think those are all a number of factors that come in. So I think I may ask the architect, who's Nick, who's here with us, to give a little more comment just on that element of it, simply because I haven't specifically been involved in discussions about considering a lower height. If that's okay, I may pass it to him.
Thank you.
There, so I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes.
So do you mind if I can share a screen? Would you?
Okay. Yes, that's fine. This is in your answering the question that was asked, is that correct?
Yes. So because I heard like comments from the councillor that Michael was, like more into the 7 points and descriptions and wanting to clarify those items. Like I really want to show you something that I think it's quite clear, and for you to I want to present the idea of how we got to this design. So you all obviously are local, and can you see the screen before I proceed?
Yes.
So you're all local and you're all aware of the height of the residence and adjacent residences. You all know that basically we are not obstructing anybody on the south because basically that's a railway. there's like a railway tracks there. So the south orientation in front of the building is quite open and not obstructed for anybody. Just by locating the building, even when we were locating the building, we were very, very careful. So when you see here, this is the footprint of the building, and I will come back to the height of the building, but I just want to give you a little bit intro to see our perspective of how we arrived to these apartments and numbers and development. We made like a conscious effort to open up the spaces in front of the existing housing, so they're not impacted. In particular time of the year, like it's like a summer and spring and fall, which is where the people usually bring up their chairs and sit outside their yards. So this is like a sample of the shadow study, which is part of the instruments of the city to prove that this, what's here, will not disrupt the backyards of the habitants that are there. So you can see this is the summer shadow study.
If I may, Chair, this was not my question. It was
I
more the
know
traffic
that,
and everything else,
Thank you. And I was just going to say, the shadow study was not, which was,
not in question.
nobody's contesting the shadow study.
No,
So if you
let's go.
could please just address the question that was asked by
Yeah,
Councillor
so
Accioni.
here, let me try to address one more thing. So please be aware that the central design study was done 10 years ago, and this was the property. Just this was the piece of the property that was entertaining 4-story building. This is the size of the property now. So in that same central design urban area study, there are 3 points in Woodstock that are classified like a gateways. That's number one. And the other 2, they are allowing 8-story buildings. So this is the third one. That's the property that we're talking right now. Those are pictures for treatment of these buildings, how the city should treat these buildings in this area. And this is what we are providing now with the enlarged area that was designated for 4-story before, where the property was twice more in size. So now, getting back to the height of the building, the proposed are 8 stories. But definitely, if we have a clear and logical explanation to us of what the city wants to see from us, we are willing to work with the city about this item.
So you're willing to put it down to 4 stories, which is allowed?
No, I didn't say that. I say that now the property is twice in size. The property is on a gateway to the central urban area. And the other 2 gateways are 8-story high. So what we are saying, we're increasing the size of the property double. On the south, we don't affect any property because that's the rail. We were careful about these properties in the neighborhood, which they do. We didn't obstruct any of their courtyards in the summertime when they're pulling up their chairs and tables there.
Councillor Accioni, did you want to repeat your question again so that
Yes,
maybe that
thank you.
question could be answered, please?
Thank you very much. Nick, it was just a simple question of, was it considered to have maybe a 3 or 4-story building there that would be more suitable, especially considering the traffic that is at that intersection right now?
So at the very beginning, it was considered, but later on, as we're trying to achieve something to create a landmark here. So
may I ask then, have you actually sat at that intersection for
yes,
more than?
I've been there.
Okay, so you've had to wait at that intersection as it is without having that many more residences there driving cars. Can you see our concern?
Yes, I
For
can
my
see,
concern, I shouldn't speak for everybody, of course.
yeah, I can see the concern, but as Michael mentioned before, and I know this went through my hands many, many times. So you have in and out of the property without clogging one exit and one entrance of the property. And I can see your point.
Going to a 4-way stop sign though.
Excuse me?
I'm going to a 4-way stop. It doesn't matter which entrance way you go through or exit way you go through, you're still going to be likelihood more than 50% of the time going through a four-way stop. So we're adding a fair bit more traffic, I guess is my only point. So I will take it as, yes, you did consider it at some point, but you're not considering that anymore. Is that correct?
We are open for discussions. We are open for discussions, but the building as is, so we have to see all the sides of the story. We want to intensify. We want to create a gateway.
I'm all in favor of intensification, don't get me wrong.
So,
Just not, I don't think that's the spot. That's my concern, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions of council for Nikolai regarding the application? If you could stop sharing your screen, that would be great, because I can't see the rest of the delegations that are on.
no problem. I will do that right away. Just give me a second. Just give me a second.
Thank you.
Stop share. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Schadenberg, where would you like to direct your question?
I guess generally to any of the five members. I guess my first question would be, doesn't matter if it's going to be 5 stories, 6 stories, or 8 stories. Are these going to be apartments that will be eventually sold as condominiums, or will they always be rental property as an investment for yourself or the owners?
Who would like to answer that question? Michael?
I can answer, and I think at this point, my understanding this has changed, is the tenure hasn't been clarified. I think that they're looking to work through the rezoning now. If Nick knows different than me, but I believe at this point it hasn't been firmed up whether they'll be sold as condos or held as rental units at this point.
The one thing we have troubles defining is the word affordable. So using the small letter A for affordable, and not necessarily even a term like a geared income, but would you specifically be having some apartments maybe at a more modest rental level to attract the wider ranging demographic we have in today's society of what people can afford and expect to be able to afford, especially in new construction sometimes.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And this is I have a hard time with the idea of affordable unless you're actually meeting specific criteria about, percentage of units that meet level of income and control of rent over, an extended period of time. I think in this case, they're going to be market driven, whether if it's a rent. But again, I think the challenge is going to be always this, rent or sale is based on the size of the units. If you go with smaller units to bring down the price, you're going to ramp up concerns about density and number of people living in the units. At this point, I don't think there's been a discussion about agreeing to a specific number of units to be designated in any way. I think it will be a market-driven discussion based on the size of the units and how that will drive it out. Again, I think there may be opportunity there for that discussion, but not one that I've been involved in to this point.
Well,
Thank
also
you.
just be really just a comment. I'm also on the accessibility committee for the city of Woodstock, so to have maybe at minimum 2 accessible units would be appropriate too, wider doorways and lower countertops, et cetera, in that range.
Thank you.
And I
Anything
do
further?
think oh.
Sorry, you can respond.
No, I was just going to say, I think there could be opportunity to discuss those items like at a later, like a site plan stage or the building permit stage as well. However, that would work out. I definitely think there's opportunity there for those items.
Okay, thank you. Is that everything, Councillor Schadenberg? Thank you, Councillor Lauder.
Thank you. Just more comments through the chair to Mr. Barton. I do like the concept, and I know we need more people downtown, and that's a given. And I would hope that maybe you can come back with something that would be a little bit more compatible to the council that we could all agree on. And hopefully you will. I know you're talking about the gateway, a gateway entrance, and I think that your building is really presents that. So I would hope that we can work together and come up with something that would be more suitable for the council. So just my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We still have 2 more applications. Did you have anything else that you wish to add, Mr. Barton, or?
No, if there's no further questions, I think we've made our points.
Okay, good, wonderful. If you want to be a delegation, you know that you have to register with the clerk for Thursday's meeting. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Going on to our 3rd application, we have ZN 82115 as application for zone change, 261 Piddock Park Road, Easton, Royden, Langfield. Andrea, would you like to tell us about this application, please?
Yes. So this application for a zone change is actually, council has seen it before. It was before council last month and it was deferred based on the fact that council wanted to see a number more parking spaces. So what the applicant did, and sorry, the zone change initially was to facilitate an 18 horizontally attached townhouse style development. And then they requested site specific. So it was currently R1-13, which is a common zone that's found out in the Summit Crescent, Piddock Park Road area. And that was just because historically they were on private services. And so they were proposing to rezone the lands from this R1 special to a special R3 to accommodate the townhouse development. And then the site specific zoning was to reduce the established building line from 9 meters to 6.4 meters. So basically just reducing the front yard setback more or less. And so, as I said, council deferred the application, asked the applicant if they could provide potentially more visitor parking spaces. And so the applicant did provide an additional 5 parking spaces, which staff are supportive of. Staff, further to that, in light of the 5 spaces, we reviewed it to see if there was a reduction then in like landscape open space, or if it would affect grading or drainage or any other factors on the site. And we're satisfied that all of the criteria in the zoning can still be met, and the additional 5 spaces is suitable for this site. So unless council has questions, I'm happy to answer them, but we did go through this application last month, and the applicant has provided the spaces that council requested.
Thank you very much, Andrea. So we have seen this application before, so I'm going to ask, is there any questions of council through to Andrea? Seeing none, we do have Ali with us again tonight. If there's any questions that you would like to have of the developer. Welcome, Ali.
Hi, everyone.
Is there any, does council have any questions regarding the changes that they'd like to ask? Councillor Accioni?
No questions really, through the chair, of course, to Ali. I just want to say thank you for kind of listening to us and kind of looking at you know, the concerns in the neighborhood and everything else. So really do appreciate that. So thank you.
I sat through the meeting and I was thinking that I should come to more of these because I feel that our council, we're in very good hands. And I have a couple of sites that me and Andrea are working on to get some units there. They're also on arterial roads. So it was very interesting to see the project that we were just discussing. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. No further questions of council. Then I do believe we have one delegation. I think they're in opposition, but I'm going to call on Jeff Lepper if he's there. Hi, Jeff. How are you tonight?
I'm good.
Are you with Ali or?
I'm neither.
Are you a neighbor?
I am a neighbor.
Okay, thank you.
I reside at 265 Piddock, the adjoining property. I'm not in opposition per se of Ali's proposed development here, but I do have some significant concerns still.
Okay.
Madam Chair, you brought up the fact about the R1 and R2 and R3 zonings and how we should be more inclined to keep the R1. I'm of the same feeling. This is the exact reason why I moved from the city I did to this particular location. It was because it was an older residential street. It had that hometown feel. I am disappointed to see that we're now proposing a development of multiple townhouses. More what I'm concerned about is not the development of the townhouses, it's the effect that those townhouses are going to have on the neighborhood. We already have seen an increase in traffic on Piddock Park Road from the new developments to the east and to the west. That's a concern for me. I have concern with pedestrian traffic on that road. We're just coming out of a pandemic. We're seeing lots of people walking, right? That street.
Hopefully we're coming out of a pandemic.
Yeah, we're still in it, but we're coming out, hopefully.
Uh,
My concern is the traffic that's on that road. For one, it's a 2-lane street with no sidewalks, no curbs. It's a dangerous road to walk on at night. Now we're providing an avenue for another 16 units of people, families, to walk on that road, travel on that road at risk. I'm worried about the additional traffic that's coming from that townhouse development. We're talking about potentially 36 cars in that development, if we're talking 2 cars per unit, which is of concern because I think most of those, if you can agree with me, most people do not use their garage as a parking spot. They use it as a storage space. So you're going to have potentially 18 cars that do not have parking. Where do they go? I appreciate the additional visitor parking spots. That's fantastic, but it's simply not enough. The overflow from that development is going to go strictly right onto Piddock Park Road. It's going to be on the side. There's no curbs, there are ditches. I'm concerned that we're going to have people coming off the side of the road, especially in the winter, especially in the summer when we talk about the increased traffic to Piddock Park itself. These are all significant concerns that council should really take into consideration with regards to this development. And we haven't even seen the existing townhouse development start yet, right?
I just wanted to reassure you that after the last planning meeting where this application came forward, it was brought up to the engineers that about the roadway and the amount of traffic that is on it and the fact that there are no sidewalks and that the city needs to be addressing that area quickly because of the volume that's out there.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. The other concern I have, and it's just with the revision to the plan, you've added the additional spots, which are fantastic, as I've said before, but it looks like you've decreased the size of the snow storage area. This is a concern as well. If we're going to have a winter like they're projecting any year moving forward, and you're using that small storage area, where is that water going to run off to? You've got neighboring properties that are going to be built in behind my existing property, and there's already concerns of high water levels in that area, not only in my property, but in adjacent properties and across Piddock Park Road. I'm concerned of what that effect is going to be once we start putting another 16 or 18 foundations in there. Where is all that water going to divert to?
Ali, did you want to respond to his question?
Absolutely. Hi, Jeff. Jeff, thank you for bringing the concerns forward. I totally agree with both the points. They're both very valid points. As I moved here 11 years ago, and I used to live in north of town on Arthur Parker when Kingsman started building, and it was very only one street. And now when I moved from there and I go there and I see the development, and it doesn't seem like Woodstock, I understand, but this change is inevitable. It's coming, and it's gone all the way to Chatham now. I'm in the real estate field, and we're following this very, very quickly. Like earlier, Councillor Lauder talked about investors buying places. There was a report that was released last week. 25% of the buyers in the market are now investors. That's a very big percentage, right? And how does affordability come in? You know, how do you create these things? So our idea was to bring in the townhome development, because it is the bottom part for home ownership. For most affordable, you can get in the home ownership and have some space and some yard and things like that, right? So we'll go to the first point you mentioned about the traffic, the walking, the roads, the sidewalks. Like Councillor Talbot just mentioned, they spoke about the development of that area. And projects like these will help generate the revenue for the city to do that when we're paying development charges and building permit fees, and then the property taxes levies over the years will help to you know, maintain that road and maybe widen it or add you know, sidewalk and things like that. Doing the opposite might hold the city, because everything comes down to the budget, what we can spend money on, right? So that's my first point. And we will comply with every city regulation and everything that's needed there. Number two, we have additional spots that we added in the snow water, snow banks you talked about. At the site plan time, we'll do something with the stormwater management, and the engineers will look at that and where the water will flow and things like that, right? And that'll all come into consideration. I'm not sure if we'll have to put tiles along. Like there's a project on Huron Street where the French school used to be, and they put 26 units in there, right? And it's all around the residential R1 homes. And I've recently been involved with the builders group in there, and I see how they did it, where they have 3 tiles running, 2 at each side of the property, 1 in the middle, so to control that stormwater. And I looked at the parking things they did over there and etc. And we kind of got a bit of idea from that, or inspiration, you should say, from that, from there. So definitely, I believe Andre and I have spoken about stormwater management, and at some point we'll have to go through that process. And I'm going to leave that to the engineers to figure out exactly what's needed there, right? I hope
Thank
that
you.
answers the concerns.
Thank you, Ellie. Anything further, Jeff?
It's in regards to the setback from the road. Was there
Okay.
ever consideration in reducing the size of the townhouse development from 18 to 16 units, eliminating the 2 front units? That would give it the setback from the road that every other house or property on that street has, and you wouldn't have to go through that process.
Yeah, you know, we haven't looked at that, Jeff, to be very frank. I haven't looked at that option. When we took this to the designer, the architect firm, they look at the land portion, and like Andre mentioned earlier, it's all number of units. And once we get to the site plan part, we'll get into floor plans and how big each unit has to be, etc., etc. So what they did is they took either side of the properties, and I think they took an average of both sides of the lot, and then we came to that lot front setback, and that's how we pushed it there, right? Number 18, right? It's just most optimum, you know, for us to put just similar units, 666, and you know, that was the idea there. We never really thought about that, to be honest, Jeff. Yeah.
And how is the property going to be serviced as far as garbage and recycling? Is it going to be serviced by the city internally, or is there a provision for garbage and recycling?
No, so these sort of developments, there's a new word for it. We call it portal fees, right? And it's becoming more and more popular And you'll see more of that. What happens is in there, you got garbage removal, snow removal, grass cutting, things like that. It's another way of calling it condominium fees, but they call it portal fees nowadays. And in there, we can have provisions like people can convert their garages into storage areas. You cannot park on the lawn, you know, things like that, right? So we will definitely, you know, it's not the first development I'm going to do in town. So I'm going to make sure that we keep everybody fairly happy, and it becomes easier. We want to make this a pinnacle of the projects we do in town. We will comply with those concerns and make sure, you know, when we have the families settling in. The other day, I was talking about it to Royden, who owns the property, that how we should look into just selling it to end users and not investors. Like we were talking about things like that, and et cetera, et cetera. The growing concern between us is the rising cost of construction. And so for us, it's 18 units, and then we do the math, and we're like, okay, they're worth this much, but this is what it'll cost to build them and service the property and grade it, put the roads in, blah, 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 right? And that is why the number of units becomes a little bit more important on that end as well, because at the end, it is a development project, and people want to benefit out of it as well, right?
Thank you. Jeff, is there anything further you wish to ask?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for
Jeff.
joining us tonight, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Nice to talk to you.
Anything further from council? If not, we'll move on to the next application. Thank you, Ellie, for attending. Our last application this evening is B21728 and A21238, an application for consent and minor variance at 280 Finkel Street, 1269881 Canada Inc. Andrea, if you'd like to explain the application to us, please.
Thank you. So the final application for tonight is an application for consent and a minor variance. And the applicant is proposing to create a residential lot. Oh, my apologies. They're proposing to create a residential lot and
you know something, sorry, excuse me, I made an error there. We did have I apologize, Andrea. We did have someone else. She wasn't listed as a delegation and I didn't write it down, but we do have Leanne Schmidt with us online tonight, and she was wanting to ask a question for the last application, and we just dealt with. Leanne, did you want to join us and ask a question? Leanne, did you have any question that you would like to ask this evening? Okay, I'm gonna take that as she was more interested in hearing what everybody had to say, and if she wishes, she may join us on Tuesday. She can apply to the clerk's office on Tuesday to be a delegation on Thursday. I'm going to start back again. So Andrea, I do apologize if you'd like to start over.
That's no problem.
Thank you.
Okay. So this application is to sever a residential lot and retain a residential lot. There's currently a single detached dwelling and an accessory structure on the subject lands, and the applicant is proposing to remove both the structures if the application is approved. The applicant is also requesting relief from the zoning bylaw to reduce the minimum lot frontage for each lot from 12 meters to 11.5 meters. The subject lands are designated low density residential, and they are zoned residential zone 1. I forget what I was going to say. The applicant is proposing a single detached dwelling on each lot. I should point out that each parcel will be, although they have reduced frontage, they each have a minimum lot area being proposed of well in excess of over 1,000 square meters. And they have a minimum, or the lot depth is approximately 97 meters, whereas an average lot would have a depth of 28 meters. And so although the frontage is being reduced, staff were satisfied that the parcels are still large enough, more than large enough, to accommodate a single detached dwelling on each lot. We feel that this is a form of infill and intensification. It's supported by the low density residential policies. We circulated the application to various agencies, and staff are supportive of the application. Staff provided generally the standard comments and conditions that are applied to these types of developments. And we are satisfied that the proposals are in keeping with the area. They're generally compatible. They're proposing 2 single detached dwellings, which is what is mostly found in this area. And we feel that this will not negatively impact neighboring property owners. And again, the sites are amply sized that they can provide adequate setbacks, parking, and large enough building envelopes for each of the proposed units. So in light of that, we'd recommend that the application for consent and the application for minor variance be supported by City Council.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions of council through to Andrea? Councillor Petter? Whoop.
Just a quick comment. Tonight we've had kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly with different applications, but I just wanted to comment on this application. This is exactly what we're looking for as a council. I think I can say for all of us that these are the kinds of intensifications that we like to see, where there's ample room. I mean, this lot is very deep, and it's right across from Southside Park, and it's one of those applications that you like to see, and that's what we need more of, unlike 8-story apartment buildings. Okay, I'm done. Bye.
If that wasn't a question, that was a comment. Are there any questions for Andrea? Seeing none, I don't believe that the applicant is with us tonight, but we do have a delegation. So I would like to call on Anne, please.
Hi there.
Welcome. Hi.
Hi. I have a very weird one for you. I'm not against him building 2 houses, blah, 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 but I am against the deconstruction and construction because I have environmental sensitivities. Can you not hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm
okay.
sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, I have environmental sensitivities, which means I react to basically everything.
Okay.
So, and the wind, I'm actually downwind from that property. So whatever is going to be in the air will greatly affect me. I won't be able to enjoy my backyard, for example, because all it takes for me is one whiff and I have a bad reaction.
This would be during the construction phase, I'm assuming, Anne?
And the deconstruction too. I'm concerned about that because that building is older than 1979. Like, does it have asbestos in the bricks and mortar?
I haven't seen anything projected, and I did make an error. The applicant is with us tonight, and he will speak after you're finished, Anne.
Yeah, it's Ally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I was looking at the what's it called here? I have a very bad memory. The Planning Act, and it does state that it is their responsibility to protect the public health and safety. So this will greatly affect my health. I won't be able to, I have a hard enough time now as it is going out into the public. Like when I go grocery shopping, I have to go either very early morning or late at night when there's less people.
Okay, so I'm not really sure who to pose your question to, Anne. So I'm going to try the Chief Building Inspector, which is Craig Wallace. Craig, would you be able to help us out with this particular issue?
Madam Chairman, yes, I will try and help out with this question. I'm not an expert with environmental concerns, but construction health and safety is regulated through the Ministry of Labor. So there may be some guidance and assistance there. As for the demolition of the existing house, the contractor owner is responsible, again, through the Ministry of Labor regulations, to obtain a asbestos report on the house. And if there is asbestos found through that report, then they're obligated to remove it according to the health and safety standards for the removal of asbestos. Don't get any details. There's like type 1, type 2, and type 3. So depending on what the asbestos is, that's how they have to remove it.
Does that help you, Anne?
Okay, so my question to the asbestos, let's say it is in the brick and mortar. Does the city have anything in place to help protect everybody? Like, if it does have that, do they have to put a tent around the house to tear it down?
Craig?
Madam Chair, so it's, again, it depends on a type 1, type 2, or type 3 removal. I believe the type 3 is the worst. So yes, basically a tent would be constructed over the area to contain the dust, so it doesn't become airborne. But again, that's regulated not through the city, but through the Ministry of Labor.
Ministry of Labor, okay. So, and that's where my problem arises, is how everyone, the general public, reacts to, let's say, the smell of roofing tar. Most people will just get a headache. It's debilitating to me. Like, what happens is my throat closes, and then I can't breathe properly from that. I can't eat properly. I also have urticaria, so my skin gets affected by stuff in the air also. I have a real humdinger. I'm not sure exactly what to say, but I'm going to have a huge problem if that's allowed. And I need
Okay, well-
help. I need help.
Okay, well, I think, Anne, I believe that we appreciate you coming forward and making everybody, the developer is on with us, and I am going to ask him to come back, make us aware of your issue. I think hearing from the chief building manager, he's said that that's all regulated through the ministry and is dealt with. And I'm sure if there's something that needs to be done, the developer is under obligation to do it a certain way.
Mhm.
I'm not too at this point, and I don't know if there's anybody else in our staff that would be able to answer how going forward, what you would do at this point. This is a new one for me, so.
Yeah. And this is my only safe haven, is my house.
Right.
Yeah. It's not like I can hop in my car and go somewhere. I can't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind, Anne, I'm going to bring the developer back, and maybe he has some idea of what is in the house and what the steps will be. And maybe through notification of when work is being done, if they could possibly notify you, that might give you an opportunity to, you know, be able to get out beforehand if you need something, or because I'm sure if you have that kind of an issue, you must have some type of purifying system in your house for air.
It's not that bad, but I shouldn't be, how can I put it? Everybody went through COVID, and you know how you're trapped in your house? It would be even worse for me. I wouldn't be able to go outside of my house.
Okay.
It would affect me so that, well, if I got sick, I wouldn't be able to go to work.
Just going to call it back on through to you, Craig, do you have any suggestions, or can you offer any direction to Anne about this issue, other than the ministry has requirements?
Madam Chair, I think the best I can offer, again, there's outside agencies that regulate the discharge of contaminants, construction. That's the best advice I can offer at this time.
Okay, thank you. So I guess going forward, that would be, we would have to rely on them to give us advice, or give you advice going forward, how we're going to do it. And you said you work, so you're not home during the day?
No, I'm off work right now because I hurt my knee, but hopefully I'll be back.
Okay, so you might not be home during construction time, or?
Yeah, I'm usually home by 4 o'clock.
Okay. Okay, so I don't think, we don't have anybody else left to answer any questions, but you've definitely given us one for food for thought. But the different agencies, I guess, will be the ones that will have to be contacted to find out. But if you're back at work, it might not be affecting you, as you'll be gone for the time during construction or that's required.
It would definitely be helpful, but are they going to do construction on the weekends?
I can't answer those questions, but if
Exactly.
we can ask the developer though. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ally, if you wouldn't mind coming back. Thank you, and I do apologize. It wasn't listed on my sheet tonight that you were the applicant. I only had Anne down as the delegation, so my apologies.
No worries, Councillor
Thank
Talbot.
you.
Hi, Anne. I was listening closely. I hope you feel better and your knee gets better as well. And just to clarify, you're a neighbor. Which property are you residing in?
I'm at 296. So two doors up towards the pool.
Okay, so you're south of the property. And then there's a property in between us with all the trees and everything.
Yes, that's
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, and then there's a house there. So we are, I have a measuring thing here, where the existing house, the south wall of it is about 91 feet away from your property. I cannot guarantee you anything, but we have demolished few properties. The demolition is very contained, and it's kept within the work area. It's fenced and everything. We follow each and every regulation that the bylaws ask us to do. And we will try our best. We can use water during demolition. So what the water does is it makes it less dustier when you're bringing the structure down. So things like that, I can definitely try my best to look into that, right? As far as the air, I cannot control the air, right? I don't want to be
Yeah,
that
I know.
powerful.
I know. But
Yeah.
I have a hard enough time as it is right now. When either side of me does their laundry, I can't be outside. When they have a fire, I can't be outside.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think by having brought it to the developer's attention is definitely the first step, and everybody is aware. And again, the ministry and the agencies will be the ones that will be needed to be, I guess, we get advice from them as how to go forward. But if you're back to work, that might be one of the easiest resolutions. As far as construction, will have the least effect on you.
mhm.
Okay, and I just found out that Leanne was here for this application, not the last application. So this has been a wonderful night. Is there anything else, Anne, that you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. I think-
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing your concerns forward. We'll go to Leanne. Leanne, you wanted to ask some questions?
Hi there. Some of my concerns are, I think our fence between our houses, your property and mine, that was a court-ordered fence. So I'm not sure where we stand with that fence, and the whole back part of it isn't finished. And I have 3 young children, so their safety with the construction site beside me is a concern.
Leanne, can you tell me what your address is, please?
Sorry, 290 Finkel Street.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm the direct neighbor.
Yep. No, I'm just looking at the map. So
yeah. Another concern of mine, my children go up to Spencer Street to catch a bus, and there's already no sidewalk on our side of the street. So adding more driveways poses more of a safety concern with more cars there for my children. And I'm also wondering about the trees along, I'm not against or for, I'm just questioning things. There's lots of trees against the fence line, and the roots, I'm guessing, are going everywhere. Are my trees going to get destroyed in this process? So these are the things that I have concerns about.
Ali, can you answer the questions that apply to you, please?
Absolutely, Leanne. Leanne, so the fence, I want to come back to it. The fence, do you consider the fence to stay the way it is?
I don't particularly love it, to be honest. I know the front part of it, I heard was ordered between, I've only been in the property for 3 years, so I'm also new. I heard it was court ordered, but the whole back part needs to really be redone. But I heard it's on your property, the actual fence. So I don't know where we stand with that, but I don't want, because there's that slant there, I don't want my kids getting into your construction zone.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we will put construction fence up, right? And like along the property as well. That fence, I honestly, I haven't paid so much attention to it, but I've done a couple of properties recently, and we just ended up pulling the old fence and putting new fence in. The neighbors were very, very frank. Sometimes I had to borrow some water from them during the construction phase, and it worked out well. I'm very easy to get along with. That was the first concern, right? You had about the fence. Yeah. The second one for the driveway. So there's where the existing driveway is for the house. We will keep one there, and where the trees are. So your trees are not going to get damaged. If we have to take down any trees, usually when we get close to other structures where we feel the tree is the roots are spread out under the ground, we don't try to pull the tree out. We grind the stump down and put some topsoil on top of it, right? Rather than pulling it out and it disturbs all the soil around it, right? So that's one of the things with the trees there, right? And then there will be a driveway added. Initially, I was proposing a house to be built at the back, but our senior planner, Andrea, really helped me out and kind of gave me a vision to build a couple of medium-sized homes to kind of go in the neighborhood. I hope it becomes, the property is a bit of an eyesore. I bought it just recently from the people that couldn't take care of it. I went through with them in the property. We did an inspection when I bought it, just through a contractor, and then it just we didn't see any concerns or anything, because we wanted to renovate the house and then put a driveway and then put a house at the back, like a key, like a flag type of lot. But that wasn't, it wasn't the best use of the property. So we ended up deciding, if we demolish the old property and put 2 newer homes, kind of like on Spencer Street, it might be a better bet for the house. And it'll definitely raise the prices on all the neighbors' houses too. I'm not sure if you're selling, but if you ever are, call me.
Okay.
Well, my kids can't go to the school they're at anymore because we're on the wrong side of town. But anyway,
Oh, I hope I get to see you guys soon. When we're out there, I'll come say hi.
and
Okay, is there any further questions, Leanne?
this would be residential property, right? I know you guys cut hair in there a lot. You are looking at this for residential, not opening a business.
Yeah, no, this guy, he went in there and he was renovating when we were going to do the residential stuff, and my partner had his friend in there, and then when I found out, I said, you have to leave, so I kicked him out. Yeah,
there were a lot of cars coming and staying on the street, so I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, I drove by there one day and I saw, like, we were supposed to come in and do cleanup. Like, the previous owners left big mountains of gravel and things like that. And in the backyard, we took out about 60 curbs from there. I don't know what he was doing there with all the curbs. So we took all that out. That shed at the back, it needs to come down. It's really falling apart. It could even fall like on the fence side. So I want to take that out of that property and develop it into 2 nice properties.
Maybe once you get the plans, you could take them over and share them.
Yeah, absolutely. Leanne, you can also always contact me directly if you have any questions. My phone number is on the application. I would, my neighbors are very important to me. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Anything further, Leanne?
No, thank you for clarifying and answering my questions.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions of council, thank you very much, Ali, for attending both the applications. And just reminder to any of the delegates that came tonight, if they wish to be a delegation at Thursday's council meeting, they need to apply to the clerk's office by tomorrow. The applications are online if you need them. Saying that, I'll have a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Accioni, seconded by Councillor Petter. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you.